as we're kicking off this Ask Vanessa Anything, I want each of you to take a moment and get really grounded in what is important to you. So take a breath. Allow yourself to feel your feet on the ground or your bottom in the seat that you're sitting in. Take something in around you, whether it's something you can see or hear or smell or taste. I'm going to take a little sip of my mint tea and come back to center, to us, to ourselves, because really, when it comes down to it, a lot of times what parents are really looking for is a stronger navigation, internal navigation system to how to respond to things as they come up. And when you're when you're faced with when you're faced with troubling questions and maybe different demands that are coming your way from children, or maybe you're not quite sure what to do when there's something happening that, you haven't experienced before, or maybe it's even something that you feel stuck in, right? Like you're in a pattern about and you're not really sure how to get out of that pattern. Whatever it is that's happening, I just want you to know that you get to tap into your inner wisdom, and it is actually there, even if you don't have a lot of experience with kids. So something within you understands exactly what this moment needs. And the more we like listen to and tune into that part of ourselves, the more likely we're going to be able to tap into it more easily as time goes on. So today, when you're listening to these questions, I want you to be thinking about like filling up this reservoir inside of you that's really wise. And it's sort of this like pool of wisdom that you get to draw from, like, drop the bucket, pull up a bucket of wisdom and get some insight and that you can even access in the moment. Now, of course, it's not the same as spending a year or two or three or even four or five in mentorship, like folks in my Family Foundations immersion program. And we just had a grad call and a bunch of folks are saying yes to a second year and a third year and even a fourth year. But what it will do is it will give you a sense of what's possible. And when we are choosing from an expanded menu of opportunity when it comes to parenting and it comes to life, we definitely feel that more of that calm and that empowerment because we don't feel stuck in dysfunctional cycles, or we don't feel like our reaction is our only choice, right? And so this is where the mentorship helps, and listening to other people's questions can inform you as well. So first question I want to kick us off with is how do I stick to my boundaries when my kids become sad when they're disciplined? This is coming from Linda Sanchez. I'll say it one more time. So Linda Sanchez asks, how do I stick with my boundaries when my kids become sad when when they're being disciplined? So I want to just normalize something that part of the job of being a parent or a caregiver is to often disappoint our kids. Like sometimes we're going to be saying, I know this is how you think it works, but it actually works a different way. And that's not necessarily an easy thing, an easy role to play, especially because we're so attuned to our kids and often their sadness or their pain or something that's happening, really brings up emotion in us because we've played this role of soothing them so much. So to become the source of their disappointment or their sadness is really tough. And I understand where you're coming from if that emotion comes up for you, just like it does for Linda. But putting that aside for a moment, I want you to lean into this idea that our role is more nuanced than just a source of comfort and guidance for our kids from that place. So what you can do to expand that sense is you can say, well, yes, I'm a source of comfort, and I'm here to help my child or children understand how things work. So when you are sticking to a boundary, you're helping them understand how life works and that people have boundaries and there are limits to what we can have and when we can have it and how we can have it and how often, all of these things, how long we can have a thing. And they're still figuring out like sort of like the parameters of how things work. So you're going to have these moments where you stick to a boundary and your child gets upset. And the reason why is because that is part of the learning process where kids have to cope with frustration or anything that we might want to, you know, um, make happen, and then suddenly it's not an option, right? Something has to change. They're no longer getting to go first. They have to share. They have to wait for something. We ran out of something. It's just not available right now. We're going to have to go with food choice number two or number three, or and even number five on the list of their favorites because we ran out of things. And they'll have to adjust. If life was so amenable to every single momentary, want and need and desire, then we should act that way. Give them everything they want, they need, and desire at every single moment, right? But that's like not really preparing them for their lives, is it? Because there are other humans, there are limited resources at times, or there's, temporary shortages of things, and being able to adapt to those things builds resilience and character in our kids. So here's how I would um, carry it through. Toggling between the support and the demand, the kind and the firm, the soothing and the teaching. Okay. And with empathy. Because look, guess what? They're young. They're 3, they're 6, they're 9, they're 12, they're 15, right? They're still new to this game of life. And so their disappointment, there's some tenderness there, and we can let them know that it's safe to feel this way around us, and we're still going to hold the line. So we might say something like, Sweetie, I know it's not easy to, put that down right now and go get ready. This is something you really want to be engaging with. I get it. And you can even let them know why. It's like, it's really fun to play with your pinwheel collection when it's windy out. I totally get it. Um, I wish I could I wish I could wave a wand and freeze time and you could have unlimited time with your pinwheels, but that's just like not how it works, hon. So we have to follow what the clock says. It's time to go. Yeah, I know it's sad. I know you have some feelings about that, but here we go. Let's take some steps towards our room. Oh, you're not ready? Would you like some help with that? Oh, you are ready. Okay, show me you're ready. Let's start moving our bodies towards the bedroom. Oh, you're not moving your body. Seems like you're going to need some help. So I can pick you up. Is that right? And you go in to pick them up, or you say, are we going to have a more serious conversation about that if they're too big to pick up, or something about your body doesn't allow you to pick them up right at that moment, or that time doesn't allow for it. But what you're doing is you're carrying through the expectation. You're holding your firm on your boundary. In this case, Linda said it was a boundary, but you're helping them cope and adapt. And by giving them that opportunity to move through, um, you're showing them leadership, but you're also showing them that compassion, like you're there with them, right? They're not alone in this. So the other thing you can do is get ahead of it. And this is something I really like to talk about when I talk about getting kids to listen more. So this is also for Sun Yoon's question. Sun Yoon asks, how can I get my 6-year-old to listen? And so for both Linda and Sun Yoon, uh, you can get ahead of it a bit because what all of us know intuitively when it happens to us is that we all are going to be more on board with something if we feel like we were given a heads up, we were maybe given some choices and some influence about how the thing goes, and we even have an opportunity later to give feedback about what we liked or didn't like about something. All of that helps us to win cooperation, including having someone be empathetic, like I was just describing, and kind of get into our world a bit about what we like about something or what we don't like about something. So how do we do that proactively? Well, for example, in my year-long program, we work on proactively creating routines together with a lot of buy-in from the kids, so they're more intrinsically motivated and they have more ownership over things like their, getting ready steps or their chores, right? We also do things like we go over like expectations ahead of time, not while it's happening and they're already in this sort of like trouble zone of, where we need a discipline, but we're letting them know that what's okay, what's not okay, and then also what sometimes is okay in certain circumstances, like what the exceptions are to the rules. We can lay all that out ahead of time. And we can even get on the same page as a family. And this is something we spent 2 months on in my program for a reason, about how do we do conflict in our family? Like when we have a disagreement, when somebody makes a mistake, when we're trying to work through a problem, how do we approach that? And what does it look like to repair when we really step in it? Yeah, and cross a line. When you have all those pieces in place, the listening just comes so much easier. It's not even you kind of shift away from getting your kids to listen to like getting on the same page as a family, as a team. Like, how are we going to work through this thing and in a way that is agreeable to all of us so we can get on the same page and have a plan going forward that we can refer back to and hopefully eventually just becomes a part of daily life. That's the opportunity that comes with a more proactive approach, which is really lovely. And I keep seeing it in my like first year graduates, my second year grads. Like we just had a grad call, as I mentioned, and they're talking about this. They're saying, we don't have to give reminders in the morning anymore, and we've been on time every single day. Whereas last year we were late more days than we were on time. And we have three kids, and we're getting them out the door. So I'm like, okay, if they can do it, we all can get there, right? So hopefully that's some inspiration for Linda and Sunyan. Next question. How can I help my 4 and 10-year-old with motivation and focus? This is coming from Amie. So Amie, two different age groups, wildly, but also both can be leaning on intrinsic motivators. And when I say intrinsic, I mean things that are like naturally motivating to the child because there's something that's interesting about them. They have an opportunity to improve themselves, and that's very attractive to children. They are hardwired to continuously learn and grow. So, bringing in some of that piece of like building their competence. And then when they feel more competent or that they can excel in something, then that brings in intrinsic motivation. And then the last one I'll mention, although there's 5 in my model, is autonomy, having choices so that it's fun, they're growing and learning, and they feel like they have some influence over it, right? With that, those autonomous choices. So if motivation and focus are things that you want to kind of figure out together, you can do what I have advised folks to do now. Almost 1,000 parents have come to my motivation workshops in the last 5 years. And I was just in a room of 80 parents last week and talking about this. And I said, think about what your kid is already naturally motivated to do. And I have a couple clues for you. You don't have to prompt them. They do it spontaneously, and it's actually difficult to pull them away from it. And then lastly, they have sustained attention. Like I've had people say, and I would set aside screen time because that's too easy and too unlike what you're usually trying to get done outside of screen time, right? So something that's off of devices that they are what I would call intrinsically motivated to do. Okay. So take a moment if you're listening to this and think about for your child or each of your children, think of one thing that they're truly intrinsically motivated to do, and just notice what that is right now. And it might even be different from 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, and definitely different from 3 years ago because they're now in a new developmental plane. Every 3 years or so, they're solidly in a new plane. Okay, so whatever that is, borrow an element from it. I had a bunch of follow-up conversations with folks who attended my workshop, and this part really stood out because you can take one aspect of the thing they're intrinsically motivated to do and bring it over into activities that currently they have a lower level of motivation that you're maybe even getting into power struggles over, or it's like difficult to keep sustained attention. Okay. You can bring that element over. What I mean is, for example, let's say anything that has to do with dinosaurs, they're in their dinosaur phase or whatever, trains phase, or, mammals of the rainforest, whatever it is, a high interest subject. And you can bring that over into areas that have nothing to do with that by like letting them bring in an action figure about that, or reading a story to them while they're eating the food that is not their preferred food at the dinner table. You can play dinosaurs on your way to doing the thing that they don't really want to do right now. Now, a little bit of an older version of that, like that's probably 3 to 6, maybe up until age 7, 8. But when you get to like 9 through 12, you're really in a different age group. And that's where, Amie has a 10-year-old. So that's why I'm talking about this in the older age context. With a 10-year-old or 9 to 12-year-old, you're going to want to ask them, like, even to have bar on their ideas of like, hey, so I noticed that when we do this, where there's like back and forth turns, right? There's some element that's maybe more sophisticated than just like Pokemon or something, right? Where there's a back and forth, right? Like you have a turn, I have a turn, and it's really clear. That seems to really keep us rolling. I mean, we played that game for an hour yesterday, and that worked for us. I wonder if there's a way we can bring that into this part of our routine where we keep getting stuck and you always drag your feet and complain. By the way, age of 9 to 12 is the age of rudeness, according to Maria Montessori. So if you're getting a lot of eye rolls and grunts and dragging feet and complaints and even some poor hygiene, that's all a part of that age group, okay? So with your 10-year-old, I was, 9 to 12, I always like pick your battles when it comes to those pieces. Like you're not going to get probably correct every single eye roll if they're in a habit of eye rolling right now, but maybe it's about not so much about whether they're rolling their eyes or if they're doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing. Okay. Eye rolling aside. So that hopefully should give Amie some guidance. And those of you who are looking at how do we, improve motivation and focus as a family. And I have a lot of other ideas. As a matter of fact, this is something that I spent 3 days on in my and 2 months in my motivation in my Family Foundation's immersion, where we also have a motivation mastery weekend for a reason, because motivation is sort of like one of the biggest pillars of life. And so, as well as emotional mastery and motivation mastery, they like those two are so strong, and the rest of it is, and contributes to a better life. But I feel like if either of those are off, that's when we can really see some difficult dynamics emerging in the family, right? Low motivation or low ability to cope with emotions or navigate emotions. Either one of those can throw things off wildly. So if that's you, make sure you let me know which one you would like to have more support with, emotional mastery or motivation mastery. Or if you're like curious about how all of this fits together in my program, let me know because we're enrolling and we have a few spots left in our January cohort. So if that's you, I need to know soon so we can check out if it's a fit. So back to the questions. Allison asks, for her 7-year-old that her 7-year-old often has what she would call Goldilocks meltdowns, and she wants help working through these. So she says, my 7-year-old has daily Goldilocks meltdowns. What can I do to help her work through these? Allison, for your 7-year-old with her daily Goldilocks meltdowns, you can absolutely help her work through them by helping her stretch her tolerance for what is just right. And what I mean by that is like, degrees of difference and figuring out for her, and I like to think of it as like scaffolding or breaking it into smaller steps. Like what is her zone of tolerance for outside of Goldilocks, right? And if it like how far can you stretch out of that zone before it dysregulates her, triggers her, and creates a meltdown? I would want to sort of focus in first on her preferences and what conditions do work. And then I would want to start stretching it out. And one thing I can say is that if you're not going to do more than stretch and it's going to absolutely be out of her Goldilocks zone, coming back to those tried and true tools that all of my clients use, which is like previewing, making sure that you offer some choices, give her a sense of how she might cope if it does start to upset her and she starts to get dysregulated. Let her know that you're there for her to problem solve if that happens and comfort her, and that you are going to continue down the path of solving this together. All of those are super helpful. The other thing I have to ask is that when kids are like have a very narrow, very rigid sense of like what they can tolerate, oftentimes we have to like, make sure that they don't have like sensory sensitivities that perhaps need to be looked at, because there are very specific ways to work through those with, for example, occupational therapy. That's why I have an occupational therapist, Catherine Dunn, on my team. And we're going to be releasing a podcast episode next month that with Q&A that relates to sensorial needs. So keep an eye out for that if that's your kid. Another reason they can be really rigid is they can have some degree of OCD, and that's not for me to decide. It depends on whether their medical practitioner agrees with that diagnosis, and you can have your child assessed. If it's something that seems like it's really a disproportionate from the stimulus. So if here's the size of the problem and your child's reaction is this big, and it seems like they're not really able to function until you get to the very narrow, very tiny exact parameters being met. And it's on a regular basis. It's highly frequent. It's really intense, and it doesn't seem to be shifting very easily with some of the tools that I've been sharing or that general practitioners would share with you. Then it's worth checking out. So I just wanted to mention that because whenever I hear kids having Goldilocks meltdowns, I want to get clear about like, well, how big are these meltdowns and how frequent are they and how narrow is that sort of like line you have to walk on in order for them to stay in a space where they can be regulated enough to function in daily life. And that may not be Allison's child, but it might be someone else's out there. So it's worth mentioning. Next question. Let me start that over. How can we garner cooperation and get on the same page as a family? And this is from Moran. And I want to say that a lot of what we're trying to do in daily life is just this. And so all of it counts towards that. But I think it's the spirit of how you approach it that shifts more towards getting on the same page, versus just the actual strategies. So when you have a spirit of curiosity, you have a spirit of compassion. When you want to step into also leadership alongside that, of being able to offer clarity and guidance around what's expected, how we do our day, how we solve conflicts, what our routines look like. That combined leads to more cooperation and getting more on the same page. And what I don't recommend though is that you try to do it all at once. So you can work on your internal shift, your sort of, like I said, spirit of curiosity and compassion and your leadership alongside taking on one project at a time. So, like in my world, I have my clients work on one routine at a time, and they might be working on one limit or two at a time at most, and then maybe one coping tool or strategy at a time as a baseline. That's kind of where we start. And then we build from there as we discover what works. And of course, we can always sprinkle in intrinsic motivation tools and conflict resolution tools and other things. But I would just be taking it one thing at a time. So, because like it feels so good. Like, let's say you conquer your morning routine where you've got, good listening, cooperation, motivation. We've got clarity of what the expectations are. Everybody's, invested in it and working towards a common goal. That naturally leads to a feeling of not only cooperation, but being on the same page as a family. The other thing you can do that's really important is if you have co-parents in your life, is have a regular meeting and whatever that looks like in your family. It could be daily or weekly or monthly or quarterly, depending on how frequently you connect. But do set aside time. And a lot of times people lean on coaching programs like mine or coaching sessions to create space for that because it's on the calendar and there's somebody there that's sort of like a third point reference to guide the conversation and bring attention to specific tools that might be better right now and organize you around your plan so you walk away with clarity from every coaching session or group call. So if that's something that's appealing to you, make sure you let me know and go check out what's available out there in terms of structured support. But back to the principle, which is, for me, my favorite is that uh, especially live-in co-parents, but I would say any caregiver team, whether that's a mom and a nanny or a dad and a dad or whoever it might be, a parent and a teacher every 2 weeks. You have some kind of touch base where, you're either like watching the same video or you're coming to the same live session or you're reading the same chapter or you're, going over the same handout and you're choosing something you're focusing on for the next 2 weeks. And sometimes it's two different things that are compatible. I'm going to work on not yelling as much and walking away and calming down before I come back. I'm going to work on referring to the chart instead of becoming like a reminder robot, like constantly following the kids around and monitoring what they're doing and repeating myself, right? So you have maybe two very different things you're working on, but they're compatible, right? And then next 2 weeks, how did that go? Just like I do at the beginning of every coaching session, how did it go? Let's troubleshoot what worked, what didn't work. Let's learn from that. And now we're, going to template that forward to like what we could work on next. And also sometimes people come in like that, none of that worked. I'm like, great, we ruled something out. Now let's try something different. So being willing to be in that spirit of inquiry and curiosity and compassion for the process and understanding that this is actually how it works. I'm going to say it again. This is how it works. We don't usually hit it out of the park every time. And I think there's actually an issue with a lot of parenting advice out there where people say, I have the answer. If you just do this, then you'll get this result. Then people go home and they try it once and it doesn't work. And they immediately think either bad strategy or bad parent or bad kid, right? Like there's something wrong with one of the three things versus the idea of like, I'm in the lab of life and I'm going to be figuring it out as I go and seeing what fits my kid and what fits this moment and what fits my family and aligns with my values. And it's a process of discovery that takes time. And I know that on the one hand, that sounds like bad news because it sounds harder. It's more of a marathon than a sprint. But it should also be good news and give you some relief that like if you don't get it right the first time or it doesn't work the first time you try something, that you don't need to throw in the towel. You don't have to give up. You can keep trying and try something just more of like this is a data point instead of this is a value judgment on whether or not I'm a good parent or a bad parent or this technique is a good or bad technique or my kid is a good or bad kid. Putting that value judgment aside and saying, oh, I learned something today, at least at this time. This doesn't really work for my family. Or, oh, I learned something today. This seems to be something to keep on the menu because sometimes it does work. Let's make sure it's on rotation. And allowing yourself to step back out of taking it too personally and being all about you and be more about like this is how the role works. This is the job. It's in the job description. Willing to try things and see how they work and adapt and come up and kind of customize to what's needed. Okay. All right. So I have a couple more questions. If you're here live, would love to hear from you just to say hello or, whatever you'd like to let me know in the chat if you're here. If you have a question, this is the time to get your question answered. I'm here on Instagram and on Zoom at this time, and also a Facebook group. So if you're in any of those three places, I am available to take your questions. Otherwise, you can put them in the comments and I'll come back later and have a chance to answer you. Okay. All right. So next question. Here we go. How can I help my 5 and 7-year-olds have more stable emotions and improve mood management? And not just their mood management, but mine also. I love this question. So when we're talking about stable emotions and mood management, we're really talking about a combination of self-care and attunement and being able to help our children also learn how to, kind of stack their deck for success with when it comes to, challenging moments and triggers coming up. A couple of things. First of all, you're right. It's you too. You have to work on your own strategies. And what I want to say is that sometimes parents keep it really secret what they're doing to calm themselves down. And I want you to be more transparent about that. And especially things that will, like are age appropriate and could be helpful to your kids. Like telling them like I'm gonna go smoke a J is probably not very age appropriate, right? But saying like I'm gonna step away and get some fresh air and do something to calm my nerves would be age appropriate, right? And just letting them know that you're a human too and you have a nervous system because guess what? They sense when you're dysregulated. Even though you think you're keeping it a secret, you're not. And it actually kids become quite adept at sensing the emotions of the people around them, especially their caregivers, to get a sense of like how they should be responding to their situation and whether or not they are safe and loved, or if this is the right time to laugh and those kinds of cues, right? So be transparent about what you're doing to soothe yourself and then add in some tools that you're trying that you would love for your kids to try. In front of the kids, I have done roller coaster breaths, four square breaths, flowering candle breaths, balloon breaths, lion's breaths, right? I have done tense and release tools like exploding star and all these things. By the way, on my website, I have a guide for these strategies if you'd like to check it out at thecalmempoweredparent.com. At the top, there's a get your free guide, little form you can fill out, and you'll get a copy of my favorite ones. And choose something and do it in front of the kids, and you'll be surprised. Certain things will stick and certain things will bounce right off, but in the end, they have a menu now. And if you do it consistently over time and transparently, it's I've always been really impressed with how kids will spontaneously start to use the tools, or will just even simply remind you to use your tool, which is plenty awareness that we want to see them starting to grow. One of my favorite things that happens after my other very popular workshop, which I've given to about, over 1,000 parents now, about navigating big emotions and with calm and confidence, is about, this idea of like flipping your lid and putting your lid back on. And without going into too much detail at this time, because this is not a workshop format, but I have the parents go home and try it with their kids, not only teaching them that, there's this thing that you have that's called a lid, it can flip off and you can put it back on, which is, a model to model like the brain, but also to just start saying things like, I need to find a way to put my lid back on, and then do it in front of your kid. And I've had parents show the roller coaster breath in front of their kid, or a four square breath, etc. And then the next hour or next day, the kid goes, "Mommy, you need to do your roller coaster breath," or "Daddy, you need to do your four square breath," or "Mommy, I think your lid's coming off," or "Granny," and then do the hand signal with the lid coming off. And you never know what is going to stick with your kids, so do a lot of things in front of them, but something will, and that's what we can count on. Um, but I should say too that if your kid does not naturally pick up on social cues very easily, and you're struggling with this, you've been showing them for years how you say things, how you treat things, how you do things, you may want to go and check out and see if your child might be on the spectrum, because that's one of the markers of being on the spectrum, and or have ADD or ADHD, because these kids who are on the spectrum or have are neurodivergent, oftentimes they need to be trained to look for social cues. It's not necessarily something that comes naturally to them, or they have things that are obstacles that keep them from doing it without being prompted. So just keep an eye out for that. If you feel like you're like, Vanessa, I've tried that and my kid is not picking up anything from me, then you might want to check out what might be going on with your kid's ability to pick up social cues. Either way, though, bringing their attention to what you're showing them is part of what you would do, whether or not they have a diagnosis, and is great for all kids. So if you model in front of them and they're not picking it up on their own, bring attention to it. Okay, I have this thing I'm trying right now. I know that when I get dysregulated, I need something, so I'm going to take care of me right now. Okay. And if you want to watch, feel free and see if this is something you want to try later. Like you can say that even to like a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old, like you can. And oftentimes it has an impact, even if they are rolling their eyes and looking at you sideways, like they're still seeing the model, and that counts. Next question. What is the best approach for navigating sibling rivalry, from Voilin and Yael? So I have an episode that covers this. If you search Calm Empowered Parent and then just put in sibling rivalry, I do cover this in the Ask Vanessa Anything. I think it's episode 15. If you go check that out, there's a longer segment on it. But I will say that one of the most important things you need to have in your repertoire is um, a really good, strong grasp on the difference between fairness and equity, because siblings will not get same at all times. Different kids have different needs, different moments require different responses, um, and they won't always get the equal proportion of everything, whether it's time, attention, or other resources. So helping them understand and navigate the idea of equity and differences is really important. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is meet everyone's needs. And I think if you do that and show up with that consistently, they're going to start trusting you as like the arbiter of fairness. They can come to you and say, "This doesn't seem fair. Help us, mom. Help us, dad. Help us, parent, right? Help us, caregiver, please." So that's one thing you can do, for sibling rivalry. The other thing is you want to know how to fight fairly in your family, and what's absolutely not okay, what's okay sometimes, and what's preferred in how we navigate conflicts. Like getting physically violent is on most people's not okay at any time list, but maybe like raising your voice and then noticing you're raising your voice and walking away might be something that they're working on. That's okay for now, but eventually we want to get to the place where we're not yelling at each other. Like that could be your family plan for what you're working on, and getting clear about that. Another thing is having some kind of system in place for solving problems together, whether that's sitting down together at a certain spot in your family and working it out, whether you're going to borrow things like, tools for positive discipline, like I teach my clients, which could include family meetings, etc. Having a process for how you solve problems to their complete resolution, and making sure you're modeling that you're willing to also own up to your own mistakes can go a really long way. Lastly is, building in one-on-one time with each of the kids, and whatever it takes, even if it has to be one kid one week and one kid another week, or one kid one month and one kid another month. If you can't do it daily or weekly, still do it. Don't give up on it. It's actually can be deeply impactful to the relationship and give the relationship the resilience it needs so that they don't feel as competitive for your time and attention, which is oftentimes a sore spot for siblings. And more on this actually in the episode 20 that's coming out with Coach Catherine. We answered a question about this, about three kids who were all competing for the dad's attention and how to balance that. So stay tuned for that coming out the first week of December, that Monday. I think it's the second that you'll be able to have a chance. Is it the second? No, it's the second week of December. Yeah, it's on the 9th that you'll be able to see that question addressed in a back and forth format with a client. It's a really lovely last piece of that episode. So you can check that out. All right, last questions for the parents of teens. I love this. My children are all in their teens. And this is from Jennifer. She says, how should we balance keeping them safe while still giving them freedoms? Oh, this is so good. So I always like to say that, kind of going back to the Montessori principle of freedom within limits. And what we would often do is we would calibrate what those limits are based on what the child demonstrates they are truly ready for. And I like this on two sides of it. It's not just their freedoms, but also their responsibilities or the expectations we place upon them. So, for example, if a child is demonstrating that they absolutely cannot keep track of their stuff, they're losing their stuff all the time, or they can't take good care of their stuff, then perhaps they shouldn't have access to these things until they're able to take better care of them, or they need to like turn them in. Like I've had parents whose, kids are not very good at maintaining their devices. And so they have them turn them in periodically, and we do like a little health check on the device. Are we taking care of it? Is the screen clean? Have we, whatever done, close the apps at the end? Or are we charging it regularly? And until they're showing they're really ready to be fully responsible for it, they don't have like unfettered use of this device, right? Also, so that, and also being showing that they're ready to make good choices around it, right? So readiness is really the bigger factor here than anything. If you want to lean into like a tool strategy, is to continue asking, what do I think they're ready for? What evidence do I have that they're ready? Or how could they show me that they're ready for this level of freedom and responsibility and level of expectation and demand? I've definitely seen parents undershoot and overshoot in terms of, what level of demand or freedom or responsibility they give their kids. So really lean into that question. The other, and reflect back to them the observations you have, and give them opportunities to demonstrate readiness and to demonstrate that they can be responsible, and lean into supporting them with that, whether it's helping them cope with their initial disappointment, or it's walking them through the steps to gain that level of responsibility and demonstration of readiness, or if it's doing it together first, where you're there to kind of, keep an eye on things. And then when you see that they can really handle it, then you step away more often until eventually they're able to do it on their own. I think of like kids being able to use a hot stove with, on their own, cook a whole meal all the way through, versus just the microwave. And you being there, and then you checking in periodically across an hour, and then eventually you reflect back to them. Wow, you really are ready to use the stove on your own. I see that. And let's go over one more time. What are the safety rules? And then asking them how it went and checking the space. Did they clean up or not? Right? If you go through that cycle of learning where you kind of scaffold to greater levels of like difficulty, and then they can really demonstrate their responsibilities, their level of responsibility, and then you can increase their responsibilities and grant them more privileges and freedoms. All right, so we got through a lot of questions today. Thank you for being a part of this Ask Vanessa Anything. If you'd like to submit a question, you can always go to my website, the calmempoweredparent.com, which also is the place where you'll find all of the podcast episodes. We're rounding out season two. Very proud of these episodes and thrilled that I've had a chance to interview the folks that I did and share the knowledge that I have been able to this season. And there's a form there towards the bottom of the page where you can submit a question. And we've definitely had questions come through for me and also for experts. You can also go over to the Raising Our Resilience parent group on Facebook and request to join. And there's a form there that has the opportunity to, let us know what's the hardest thing. And that's often where we get these questions. And so if you're not a part of the group yet, or even if you are, feel free to post a question if you're already a member, or request to join, and we'll catch your question and have a chance to answer it next time. All right. Thanks, everybody. Lots of love to you. And I see you becoming that calm, empowered parent who's raising happy, confident, and resilient kids. And we're not meant to do this on our own. And so just, continue finding the support where you find it in your lives, and consider, finding more if you really feel like it's that time where you want to create that foundation for your family and within yourself, that fortitude to be able to carry forward your vision for your family, even when times are hard and sudden new behaviors show up and new tests are that the families put through new tests. Just know, like, others have been through it, and there are really big-hearted, great folks to do this with, including mentors like myself and my coaches. So reach out, let us know. You can always shoot an email to raisingourresilience@gmail.com to inquire about getting more support. With that, I will leave you. Good job, everybody. Lots of love till next time. Bye for now.